Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Totally Awesome Podcast. My name is JoshAgeddon, and today, well, I'm actually going to be doing two podcasts tonight. This is the first one, and I'm going to be doing another one later, so by the time all of this is recorded, I'm no longer going to have a voice. So, enjoy my beautiful, sultry, dulcet tones while you can, because when I'm no longer able to provide you with my angelic harmonic voice, I will make a premium paywall for only the most diehard of TAW subscribers, to where only they can hear me. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. So on this episode, I'm going to give my thoughts and opinions on the new Peacock original show, Twisted Metal. And boy, do I have some thoughts on the Twisted Metal TV show, and a little bit of background on me. I love the Twisted Metal video games. Twisted Metal is one of my top 3 favorite video game franchises. My top 3 is Twisted Metal, Devil May Cry, and Sonic the Hedgehog. And I know one of these things is not like the others. One of these things just doesn't belong. But for a long time, I've always considered Twisted Metal to be my favorite, because just the absolute insanity and just chaotic nature of the franchise, its personality is just, I just love it. I adore it. It feels like it was made for me. It was like David Jaffe peered into my soul in 1996 when I was -1 years old and was like, Joshua would like that when he's born. So it was like a weird negative birthday present that I got when I was not even a fetus or a zygote. This podcast is already off to a weird start, but but yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be hold on, let me take a swig of my sweet tea. Oh yeah, sweet tea. Only get the best sweet tea here in my home state of South Kakalaki. And if you're looking for like a play-by-play or like a shot-for-shot breakdown of the show, you come to the wrong place. That's not how I do things here. If I was doing like a video like I did with the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy, or like the Marilyn Manson countdown video, then it would be much more detailed. But in my podcast, whenever, like with the Dragon Ball Super superhero review, or not even review, thoughts on it, that I did with my brother, or both of the Sonic movies that I did, those, or the Snyder Cut, those aren't really, they're not so much reviews as they are just general thoughts, just stream of consciousness. Anything I want to bring up, I bring up. So, but yeah, a little bit of backstory. I grew up playing Twisted Metal 2 and Twisted Metal 4. Those were the 2 Twisted Metal games that I had when I was growing up, and I love Twisted Metal 2. It's my second favorite Twisted Metal game. And Twisted Metal 4, even though it gets a bad rap, I still think it's okay. It's a decent game. And I love the concept of Sweet Tooth taking over the tournament from Calypso. So I really enjoy that. My favorite Twisted Metal game, this is going to be a very unpopular opinion, but my favorite Twisted Metal game is the most recent one from 2012, which is, it's insane that Twisted Metal 2012 came out almost over 10 years ago. It's crazy to me that this franchise has been basically dead for a decade, and now we have a TV show. And I guess real quick I'll touch on Twisted Metal 1, in my opinion, is it started it all, and I really do enjoy it, even though it's really old. Twisted Metal 2 is awesome. I despise Twisted Metal 3. That game is absolutely horrific. It's one of my least favorite video games of all time. Twisted Metal Small Brawl is almost as bad as Twisted Metal 3, but it's not quite that bad. Like, it's possible to have some dumb fun with that game, because you can at least move around in Twisted Metal Small Brawl. And I love Twisted Metal Head On, even though I don't have a PSP, I have a PS2, so I have the extra Twisted Edition with all the crazy special features and stuff, like the Twisted Metal Lost, which is basically like an unfinished sequel to Twisted Metal Black, which I believe they were going to call it Harbor City. And it's playable, it's workable. And the little bonus thing where you get to run around as Sweet Tooth outside the vehicle, I enjoy that too. And Twisted Metal Black. Of course, you can't forget Twisted Metal Black. Twisted Metal Black is awesome as well. Even though that's most people's favorite Twisted Metal game. It's either Twisted Metal Black or Twisted Metal 2. Those are the two favorites. My favorite Twisted Metal game is Twisted Metal 2012 for PS3. It's the whole reason why I even bought a PS3, because when that game came out, I really wanted it, but I had an Xbox 360 and a PS4. Well, actually, the PS4 didn't even come out yet. I was... God, how old was I in 2012? I was still in high school. I think I just started high school. I think I was in ninth grade because I graduated in 2016. But so my parents wouldn't let me play rated M games. And when it came out, when I finally was able to play it, the PS4 had already come out, so I had to go back and get an entire new console to get it. I don't think PlayStation Plus was a thing back when I got a PS3, so I could get Twisted Metal 2012. But I love that game. That one's my favorite. I know a lot of people don't like that game, but it's my favorite. But so yeah, I've been a Twisted Metal fan since I was very little. I grew up with Twisted Metal 2, and I even have a Sweet Tooth mask in my room, even though the nose fell off. So that makes me sad. But it's still a pretty cool mask that I got off of eBay several years ago. I think my mom got it for me as like a either a Christmas present or a birthday present, or just a random gift because she knew I would like it. So I got it from I think I got it from my mom. I can't remember. It was years ago. So yeah, I'm a huge Twisted Metal fan, and I have been ever since I was little. And I've always heard whispers over the past like decade or so that they wanted to do a Twisted Metal movie. Remember those days back when they were like, yeah, there's talks about doing a Twisted Metal movie, especially because for the time, the production value of especially the cutscenes of Twisted Metal 2012 were like next level. They're kind of dated now. I still think they're great, but it was a leap in quality for the series, and people were like, man, we should make a Twisted Metal movie. And I remember that the people that made Crank were slated to make the Twisted Metal movie, but the production for that stalled, and it got stuck in developmental hell for a long time. And then Twisted Metal just kind of fell off the face of the earth. I mean, Sweet Tooth was in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, but no one really cared about that game other than me. And the only reason why I bought that game was because Sweet Tooth was in it. I'm not a big God of War fan. I've only played the one God of War game for a little bit. It's not that I don't like God of War. I just haven't really gotten to suck my teeth into it. And I also liked that Dante from the DMC reboot was in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. I like the DMC reboot Dante. That's another one thing about me. I have tons of controversial opinions. Twisted Metal 2012 is my favorite Twisted Metal game, and I like Reboot Dante, the one with the black hair. I like both Dantes, so don't get mad at me for the old Dante's better. I like both of them. You can like both. Just like you can like Dragon Ball Super and Dragon Ball GT. I like both. Just like you can like all three of the Star Wars trilogies. I like all three of them. God, this video is going to get just flooded with dislikes, I can already tell. But yeah, back to Twisted Metal. Devil May Cry and Sonic kind of replaced it as my favorite franchise because just so much nothing was coming out of it for years and years and years, and it was basically dead. There were rumors every once in a while that, hey, they might do the movie, and everyone was like, yeah, they're probably not going to do that. But then a couple years ago, I remember it was right around 2021. It was like the beginning of 2021. I remember because I was in a bad truck accident in February of 2021, and around that time I was hearing that they greenlit pre-production on or at least they were starting to gather assets for a TV show that was going to be on a streaming service. And they were kind of planning on doing that, but then COVID hit, and it kind of ruined everything for a while. And because of COVID, it took them forever to start, pre-production. And I remember hearing that Anthony Mackie was going to be in Twisted Metal in the TV show. And I like Anthony Mackie, and I'll get into him later on when I talk more in depth about the show. And I also heard that Will Arnett was going to be Sweet Tooth. And my reaction to that was, huh? What? But that was back when they didn't announce until later that Samoa Joe was going to be the physical body of Sweet Tooth, like the character actor for Sweet Tooth, and Will Arnett's just going to be the voice. No, I legit thought that Will Arnett was going to be Sweet Tooth, like in voice and body, and I just couldn't wrap my head around that. So yeah, I was like, this is weird. And then again, because of COVID, there wasn't really all that. There was like no news about it for years. And then 2022 rolled along, and there was still like barely any news about the show. Although I think near the end of 2022 or the beginning of 2023, then the news broke that Samoa Joe was going to be the character actor for Sweet Tooth, and Will Arnett was just going to be the voice. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. And again, I will say until the first trailer for the Twisted Metal TV show came out, there was like no buzz. Like, because again, Twisted Metal was basically a dead franchise for years. As much as I hate to admit that, just nothing was going on. It was just like the most traction Twisted Metal got was every once in a while someone would just either play one of the old games or just look up, like, is the TV show / movie / whatever they're doing ever going to happen? But then, finally, a couple months ago, they dropped the first trailer. And, I thought the trailer I didn't think it sucked. A lot of people hated the first trailer. I just thought it looked like a generic post-apocalyptic show. It looked like the concept art for Twisted Metal Revolution, that idea for a Twisted Metal game that was scrapped, where it was like a more realistic Twisted Metal, and they just got rid of the concept because it just took all the fun out of Twisted Metal. Wouldn't have been the first time that the stupid concept took all the fun out of Twisted Metal. Looking at you, Small Brawl, the concept of that game is just so stupid. But so yeah, and I was like, I don't know how to feel about this. And then the first like sneak peek came out where it was Sweet Tooth's introduction, and it was like a bad SNL skit. And I didn't hate it, but I felt like they were basically turning Sweet Tooth into Deadpool minus fourth wall breaking humor. And my friend Sean McCarty is also I wouldn't say Sean is of course, for those of you that don't know, Sean does CIW, he does the Court Martial podcast. I've had him on the channel numerous times. A good friend of mine. He's not as big a Twisted Metal fan as I am, I don't think, but he's a fan of the series. He hated that trailer because it was just cornball goofy humor. Like, especially when Sweet Tooth was like, "Oh, you word?" And I'm just like, oh, God. Don't make Sweet Tooth goofy, or at least that good. He's a goofy character. I know a lot of people are like, Sweet Tooth should be serious all the time. That's just because you've only seen the Twisted Metal Black version of Sweet Tooth. Sweet Tooth originally was a very goofy character. Not goofy to the extent that was in the sneak peek in episode 2 of the show. Although the goofiest he's ever been was Twisted Metal 3. That was next level goofy. Like, Twisted Metal 3's Sweet Tooth is an embarrassment. It's the worst interpretation of Sweet Tooth there is. This Sweet Tooth on the TV show was not that bad. But now with all the build-up out of the way, I guess I'll go ahead and get into my thoughts on the show. And because the show came out on Peacock, and I binge-watched the entire season. It was just 10 episodes. My thoughts on the Twisted Metal TV show. Is it good? Surprisingly, I hesitate to say good. I thought it was... Okay, how do I put this? It's somewhere in between okay and good. I guess decent. It's more on the positive side. I thought that, based on what I was seeing, that it was going to be somewhere in between bad and awful. Not like the worst thing I've ever seen, but not like mid. It was just kind of like the underbelly of mid, where it's like, I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not good. I was pleasantly surprised that the show's actually kind of good. Now, part of what I was afraid of going in was, I mean, for one, it didn't even look like they were going to have a tournament in the show, which felt so, oh, that is such a live streaming adaptation of a beloved property that already existed outside of this, where they just ruined the lore. Because I was just afraid that they weren't even going to have a tournament. It was just going to be like an outlaw run post-apocalyptic future where they just happen to have a lot of car battles because that's what they did in the games. Thankfully, I was wrong. And also, if you have not seen the show, don't watch this video because this is going to be very spoiler heavy. Spoiler alert, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to get into spoilers. Again, this isn't going to be like a shot-for-shot play-by-play. It's just going to be what comes to mind. I'm just going to talk about what I liked, what I disliked, things I had thoughts on. So yeah, I'm going to give some spoilers. So if you want to see the show, the whole thing's on Peacock. Go watch it and then come back and watch this. If you don't care or if you've already seen it, please like, comment, subscribe, and continue watching because I appreciate it. It helps the channel out. I'm almost at 1,000 subscribers, and I would like to be remonetized. Thank you very much. So yeah, I thought that they just weren't going to have a tournament. My biggest fear was there was going to be no tournament, and it was just going to be, it's post-apocalyptic, and they fight in cars sometimes because that's what they do in the games. Thankfully, that is not the case. That's what it was at first, but they did it for a reason. And what they did, I actually predicted, because the way episode 1 and episode 2 was going, I was thinking, okay, the first season is basically just going to be set up. And by the end, when we're introduced to a bunch of characters and their vehicles, then there's going to be a reveal that, hey, there's going to be a big tournament, and it's going to feature characters you've seen, and that's going to be season 2. And I was correct, because that's basically the ending of episode 10, the finale of season 1, where Raven, who's like Diet Calypso, that's another thing. I was worried that Calypso wasn't even going to be in the show, because I had heard rumors that Calypso was not in the show, and I'm like, how the fuck can you have a Twisted Metal anything without Calypso? Calypso made the Twisted Metal tournament. You can't have Twisted Metal without Calypso. It just doesn't make any sense. But again, they're saving most of what Twisted Metal is for season 2, because season 1, to its credit and also somewhat to its detriment, it's a double-edged sword. Season 1 is a double-edged sword. That's the best way I can say it. It's a mixed bag, but more on the positive side. Season 1 is setup. It is basically an extended prologue that sets up Season 2. Season 2 is where all the good shit's going to happen. We're going to have the actual Twisted Metal tournament. We're going to have other characters like Axel and Mr. Grimm, and we're finally going to get introduced to something other than the back of Calypso's head. Which, honestly, the back of Calypso's head and some signs... The second I saw a sign that said Calypso is real, it kind of clicked with me, is he's going to be some mythical figure that's kind of hinted at in Season 1. And then, at the end of Season 1, we're going to find out he's real, he's holding a tournament, and then we're going to go to Season 2. And more or less, I was right on that. So the second I saw a sign that's that green, like, street sign that had the spray paint Calypso's real, that's kind of where I was like, okay, this season's just set up. And the tournament comes later. They're not going to butcher the lore. They're actually going to enhance the lore or create a lore that's like Twisted Metal adjacent that fits for this show. Which is good, which is what they should have done. Now, I will get into some nitpicks real quick. The reason why I say this is a double-edged sword, the bad side of it is, while I appreciate that this season is majorly set up, it's still just set up. My biggest problem with Season 1 of Twisted Metal, it's kind of boring at points. Like, there are multiple instances where I am just, like, I'm looking at my laptop and I'm just, like, I'll scroll across, like, the timeline of the video, of the episode, and I'm like, oh, there's 10 more minutes left. Ugh, this has been going for 10, this episode's been going on for 10 minutes. It feels like it's been going on for 30. Like, especially episodes 3 and 4 where they're just not, they don't even get in a car once and they're just talking and things are just kind of happening and they're doing a bunch of comedy. Episodes 3 and 4 are the worst episodes in the season. They're the most boring. They're just very monotonous and they don't really go anywhere until the end of the episodes. And you're like, ugh, thank God that's over. Some of the episodes are straight up boring, which is a shame because you would expect a little bit more, anarchy and chaos in something called Twisted Metal. And I just mentioned it, they would do comedy. This is a funny show, and it made me laugh several times. But there are times where they don't completely go the MCU route of ruining their own credibility by being too funny all the time to where it clashes with the tone and you can't take anything seriously. But there are a couple times where they start crossing that line a little bit. And the show, the entire time, it's basically a comedy action series. So comedy is part of the show, but I don't think that it ruined the show. Like, it wasn't a deal breaker. Whereas some MCU movies like Thor, Love and Thunder, where it's just like the movie's just so ridiculous that it's a theme park ride. Like Martin Scorsese said, it's like a theme park ride. And there are some episodes that are way goofier than others, but they do go a little too heavy on the comedy at points, and not all of the jokes are funny. Sometimes, like there's a part where the new character, the original character for the show, Quiet, the supporting the second, because John Doe, Anthony Mackie's character, is the protagonist. Quiet, I don't know what the actress's name is, but she's like the secondary protagonist. She's the leading female protagonist of the show. Her character walks in on Agent Stone's, one of his right-hand man, his emphasis on right-hand man. She walks in on him masturbating to a manga, and and she jokes before she murders him with a gun by cracking his skull with a gun instead of shooting him. She clubs him to death with a gun, but before she does, she says, "History's going to remember you as the guy who died while holding his dick in his hand." And you can just tell that the writers were like, that's such a boss line. It's so clever. It's going to get some big laughs. And it's one of those lines where it's way more cringeworthy than it is funny. You're just like, really? Some of the more crude toilet humor, it just comes off as juvenile and just annoying more than funny. Like the witty comebacks and the repartee that characters have, that's funny. That kind of stuff's funny. And the situational humor is funny. But whenever they go into the more slapstick, toilet, vulgar humor, I'm just like, really? Like there's a part where John Doe and Quiet have sex in a ball pit. And they're doing weird positions out of Grandma, whatever her name is sex book. I'm not joking, by the way. They're doing weird positions out of episode 5, Grandma Who's 6, Twister's grandma. Oh God, Twister's grandma's sex book. Of course her name is Twister. What else would it be? Twister? I barely know her. Anyway, they're doing positions out of the book, and it's supposed to be funny, but it's just more awkward. And I'm just like, just some of the humor is very cringeworthy in this show. But again, those are just more nothing deal breaking. Like my two biggest complaints is a lot of times when they're going into more just like world exploration, it gets kind of dull because not much is happening. And another reason why it feels so boring is because Twisted Metal at its core is car combat. And when you have episodes where no one's in a car for a single frame, except for when they're driving off at the end or arriving somewhere at the beginning, in a show that's based around car combat, when there's no car combat, it makes it very boring. Because, like, my favorite episodes of the show are episodes 1 and episode 10. Why? Because it has story and car combat. And when the show does have car combat, it's really cool and it's awesome and I love it. Episode 10's awesome. Episode 10 is going to make Twisted Metal fans squee through their pants. I mean, the first, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes of episode 10, I literally rewound to the beginning of the episode because it was so awesome. It felt like a live action Twisted Metal match come to life on a TV show, and it was great. And the action's great too, even when they're on foot and they're fighting. Although sometimes when they're fighting, it kind of becomes like just generic, like punching and kicking and stuff like that. And sometimes they get a little too crazy with the camera cuts. The camera cuts work better when it's vehicular combat because it lends more to the all the explosions are flying everywhere, and missiles and napalm and bullets are flying everywhere, so it's kind of chaotic. The constant camera cuts kind of work for that, but when it's just two people fist fighting, then the camera cuts get a little annoying. There wasn't too much of that, but there were some points where it was like, okay, calm down. But back to the comedy issue real quick. Sweet Tooth is my favorite character in the show. Sweet Tooth is one of my all-time favorite fictional characters. Anyone who knows me knows that I have a thing for evil clowns. And Sweet Tooth is one of my favorite evil clowns. It's him and the Joker. And again, he's a goofy character by nature, especially in the first couple games. But in episode 2, they made him basically Deadpool. Except he didn't break the fourth wall. That kind of never shutting up, constantly with wisecracks, kind of deranged, and it got a little annoying. And the whole stand-up comedy routine where he was like doing a play, like when they delved further into his character, it made more sense. But at the time, I was like, this is just weird, and not the interesting, good. This is an interesting character kind of weird where you want to watch more. You're just more like, can we just get to the part where he decapitates people? Which there's plenty of that, and it's awesome when he does. Whenever Sweet Tooth starts kicking ass, it's great. But when he's just being funny, in episode 2, I had a problem with him because it was just constant jokes. But later on, when he would go between serious comedy and just beating the shit out of somebody, that was fine. Because it wasn't just comedy. But in episode 2, it was just mostly just comedy, and it got really old really quick. But in later episodes, Sweet Tooth is much better. And yes, at the end of episode 9, when he set his head on fire, I lost my shit. Because they knew that's what Sweet Tooth tards like me were waiting for. And of course, when he finally lit his head on fire, I creamed my pants. But yeah. And I don't hate Sweet Tooth in the show. I don't hate the show. I actually think it's a good first season, a good solid prologue. But there are some things I felt could have been toned down or done better. Like, again, some of the episodes, there could have been more car combat. And again, you don't want to overexpose the car combat to where you're sick of it. But this is like the opposite extreme where you barely have any of it. And some of the episodes just suffer and they're kind of boring. So, again, I just wish that there was a little bit more, a little more movement and a little more motion, and a teeny bit less comedy. A little bit less comedy, and I feel like things would have been perfectly balanced out. But, all that said, those are really the only negatives that I have for the show. I'm going to go real quick into some things that really made me happy. For one, I love the little Easter eggs and little things that hardcore Twisted Metal fans would notice. For example, for people that are going to get mad over how goofy Sweet Tooth is, and I know I just spent a couple minutes bitching about how goofy he is. He was. But people that are going to be like, Sweet Tooth shouldn't be goofy at all. I know that some people who have only played Twisted Metal Black are going to be pissed that Sweet Tooth has a paper bag friend. They're going to think that's ridiculous. And right there, it's just showing that you've only ever played Twisted Metal Black. And that's one thing that's so obvious and annoying about some Twisted Metal fans, that they have a favorite and they don't ever acknowledge or play any of the other games. And it's just like, are you really a fan of the franchise, or do you just like that one game? You can tell with some Twisted Metal fans, because Black is the only one they talk about. and it's annoying. Like, branch out a little bit. But one of my favorite things was the fact that Sweet Tooth had a paper bag friend, because in the first Twisted Metal game, Sweet Tooth's goal is he wants to wish for his best friend to come back. And his best friend is a paper bag. That's in Twisted Metal 1. Back when Sweet Tooth didn't have a flaming head, he had green hair. And if you had no idea that there was a Twisted Metal game out there where Sweet Tooth has green hair, stop playing Twisted Metal Black and play some of the other ones for God's sakes. You can skip 3. I don't care if you skip 3. 3 sucks. 3 is the low point of the series. But at least play 1 and 2. At least play 2. But yeah, Twisted Metal, and there's even cutscene, there's even footage, even though in the original Twisted Metal 1 game, the endings of the game is just a picture of Calypso and rolling text. But that's because David Jaffe, in his infinite wisdom, decided to record cutscene endings for the game, like live-action cutscenes for the game, and they're terrible. And even in David Jaffe, the creator of Twisted Metal, he himself has admitted that they have aged horrendously. And if you have the extra Twisted edition of Twisted Metal Head On, like I do, you can go watch some of that, and like there's documentary stuff that you can watch. And all of the endings are on YouTube, and they're all very, very the embarrassing and painful side of the late 90s. It's that kind of late 90s where it's just like, oh my God, what were they thinking? But again, even David Jaffe would admit this. He even went on record in saying that this is proof as to why I should never be behind the camera ever again, or never be a director ever again. His words, not mine. But yeah, in that cutscene, Sweet Tooth wishes for and gets a paper bag. And in the show, they reference that because Sweet Tooth's best friend is a paper bag named Harold. And they actually kind of make Harold a character of sorts. And it's really funny. I really, really enjoyed it. And more references, especially with Sweet Tooth. The fact that they delve into how his name isn't actually like Sweet Tooth. His name was originally Marcus Kane. And the reveal of why they call him Needles, I laughed so hard. I can't remember what episode it was. It might have been episode 8, where the intro is Sweet Tooth or Marcus or Needles Kane as a little kid. He's on this this sitcom, and he's like the sitcom is doing well, but he's not really. He's like a struggling child actor, and he's kind of losing the audience. But his co-star, a dog, is getting all the attention. So he, in the middle of a take, he flips out, grabs the little needles that his co-star, who's playing his grandma, is using to knit together a scarf or whatever old ladies knit together. He grabs those needles and murders the dog with it, which is how he gets the name Needles. And that made me laugh so hard. And then he looks at the camera after the entire audience is screaming with blood all over his face, and he's like, "What's the line?" And then the old timey text that says Twisted Metal, and it's the intro. That was hysterical. I loved that. That was hysterical. Also, Samoa Joe was fantastic in this show. Even though he didn't say anything, it was Will Arnett was also a great voice for Sweet Tooth. Samoa Joe was the MVP of the show. He was great because he's a professional wrestler, in case you don't know. And he's really, really good at, violence. I mean, he's the Samoan submission machine. I mean, in TNA, he literally had a one-man group called the Nation of Violence. Remember in TNA around 2009 when he had like a weird penis tattooed on his face and he killed Scott Steiner with a sword? Remember that shit? Because I do. Wrestling's weird, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, I thought Samoa Joe did a fantastic job. And I also loved Anthony Mackie's character of John Doe. Of course, Sweet Tooth was my favorite character on the show, because Sweet Tooth's always... So any Twisted Metal, anything, Sweet Tooth is immediately going to be my favorite character, because I love evil clowns. Even though he was a little too much of a clown in episode 2. But outside of episode 2, I thought Sweet Tooth was more or less perfect. I didn't really care for the relationship with Stu and Stu's friend, whose name I can't remember. It more felt like just this is a guy who's kind of a wuss that we're pairing Sweet Tooth with to give Sweet Tooth something to do when he's not interacting with the protagonist. I didn't really care for Stu. I just it had funny moments here and there, but he's not an original character from the games, and I never really cared for or about him or his friend. So I wanted to see Sweet Tooth do Sweet Tooth things. I didn't really care about the whole thing with Stu. And I know a lot of people really like Stu, and that's fine. If you disagree with anything I've said on this podcast, that's perfectly fine. You're entitled to your opinion. Unless you like Twisted Metal 3, in which case you can go fuck yourself. I'm just kidding. 989 Studios is full of beautiful people that don't know anything about Twisted Metal. But anyway, and I really liked John Doe's character. They made him interesting. And that's another reference to the games because I didn't spend all that much time with Twisted Metal Black. I believe in Twisted Metal Black, John Doe, who's Roadkill, John Doe, he, in Twisted Metal Black, or in one of the Twisted Metal games, John Doe is a character who has amnesia, which is why he goes by the most generic name ever, John Doe, which is, for those of you that don't know, I don't know how you wouldn't know this, when there's a dead body and they don't know who it is, they identify it as John Doe. If it's a woman, it's Jane Doe. So an unnamed dead body is either a John Doe or a Jane Doe. So since he doesn't know what his name is, he just went by the name John Doe. And his amnesia is a reference to the John Doe of Twisted Metal Black, because in Twisted Metal Black, again, unless I'm getting this totally wrong, because again, I didn't spend all that much time with Black, but from what I remember, there's a character named John Doe who wants his memory back. And I really like that reference. And they very smartly made that part of his character arc. And speaking of which, I really do like, even though there were points where it made the episodes drag a little bit, I really do appreciate that they took a lot of time crafting the world of the Twisted Metal TV show. And this is one thing I think that the show has over the games. Because the games, as much as I love them, the world building, like it's not, there's not so much world building as there are characters, character motivations, and Calypso being a dick who can grant wishes, and arenas that you can blow up when you're blowing up each other. There's not really a world in Twisted Metal, at least in my opinion. And the reason why is because every few games the continuity changes. Like Twisted Metal 1, 2, 3, and 4, they all share continuity. But then Twisted Metal Black is its own continuity and has nothing to do with the previous games. Small Brawl is its own thing and has nothing to do with the other games. And then Twisted Metal Head On, the next one that came out, it retcons 3 and 4 out of existence, and it's the sequel to Twisted Metal 2. It's like the new Twisted Metal 3. And then Twisted Metal 2012, it's its own thing, and it does not share continuity with anything either. So the continuity of Twisted Metal is all over the place. The video game continuity is as nonsensical as Dragon Ball Super's continuity. Within the canon of Dragon Ball is as messy and all over the place as the canon of Twisted Metal. There's no through line. Except Twisted Metal's worse than Dragon Ball, because Dragon Ball has a semblance of a canon, kind of. Twisted Metal is all over the place, which ironically enough, Twisted Metal's canon being chaotic and all over the place is very Twisted Metal. It is a very Twisted Metal thing to do, to be all over the place and be nonsensical, because the franchise at its core is a nonsensical, insane, fever dream ADHD fest of a franchise. So that makes sense. But at least the writers of the show kind of were aware of that, so they just pulled certain things from each game and put them into the show. For example, even though I hate Twisted Metal 3 and Twisted Metal 4 is kind of mid, that's where they got Pizza Boy from. And I popped when Pizza Boy appeared on screen and they had identified him as Pizza Boy. I loved that. Even though we didn't get to see him drive, which kind of disappointed. But hey, they at least shouted out something from the 989 Studios games, which, as much as they're hated, they're still part of Twisted Metal. They still have the brand. And to this day, I still think the Twisted Metal 4 is not as bad as people say. I think it's a decent game. So yeah, I do like that they went to great lengths to expand the world and try to create a world where some all-powerful lunatic would hold a tournament that these other lunatics would flock to and have it make sense. Because they live in a dystopian future that's ruled by an elite class of people who are batshit insane. So within the context of this world that they've created, the most powerful guy in the world, Calypso, holding a tournament with insane drivers who are like integral to the society of this world because they deliver goods. I think it's actually kind of brilliant. Like the setup for John Doe being a driver and being in the tournament in season 2, and the whole plot, the setup for everything John Doe related is actually quite brilliant. And it actually kind of even and honestly, shockingly, the idea of him being a milkman, quote unquote, and driving between cities, and then each episode he's in a different city, and it's almost like me and my fiance have been watching Supernatural, and in Supernatural, Dean and Sam drive from town to town and do various missions while there's a main plot that's a through line. Twisted Metal kind of operates under a similar formula, and this similar formula honestly feels like a very, very subtle reference to the original concept for Twisted Metal Black 2 Harbor City. Because Harbor City, that game that was canceled, basically the idea was it was going to be like a huge open... I don't know how they were going to be able to pull this off on the PS2, which is probably part of why the project got canceled, but the idea was it was going to be an open world game where your character would drive from one battle location across a map to the next battle location. There would like be very limited menus. It wouldn't be you magically arrive at this location, fight these other people, then that's it. Then you move to this other location. No, you would win at this location, but then you would have to drive all the way to this other location, and the whole thing would just be in one huge overworld. That's kind of the concept they used for the Twisted Metal TV show. And again, I think it's a very subtle reference to the canceled Harbor City, which honestly, I've been hearing nothing substantiated, but I've heard rumors here and there that they might be they're kind of wanting to do a PS5 Twisted Metal game. This would be the time to do an open world Twisted Metal game where you have a huge overworld where there are cities where you do the matches. They're connected across this huge map to other cities that you have to drive through. I would love that. And again, I think it's brilliant that they've used that as the blueprint for the TV show. Again, there's so many references in this thing that not everyone will get. There's probably some that even I missed. There's definitely some that I missed. But I do think that the way that they've set things up, even though it didn't have the best execution, the ideas and setup for things is actually quite brilliant, and I'm very impressed with the people who put this together. Even though, again, it got kind of boring at points, and things didn't always land, especially in the comedy department. But one thing that surprisingly landed was whenever the show got serious and went the emotional route. Those parts actually worked. And I actually found myself caring about the relationship between John Doe and Quiet. They had an organic relationship build up over the course of the season, and whenever there was friction, you would find yourself like rooting, like, come on guys, get on the same page so you can, live. And you want John Doe to succeed and to get the package from Calypso, or at least that we think it's Calypso. We want him to get the package back to Raven so he can fulfill his dream. Although I love that when he fulfills his dream, he basically turns into Squidward from that one SpongeBob episode when Squidward goes to Tentacle Acres because he thinks that's where his perfect life is going to be. But he is in the quote-unquote perfect setting for him, and he gets sick of it because he wants a little adventure in his life. John Doe essentially becomes Squidward in that one episode, and it's the funniest thing ever, but it's great. and I really like it. And the whole thing is the impetus for season 2, which season 2, I don't want to jinx it, but I don't see how you could fuck this up. Like, they have lined up a layup, a slam dunk, and I'm hoping that season 1, being the extended prologue that it is, I hope that that is just a mere taste of what they have in store for us for season 2. Plus the fact that a lot of people have been watching this, and it's been getting a positive reception from fans and critics. All of these are good signs. So it's very, very likely that season 2 is going to happen. And I'm excited because I want to see the tournament. Because that was, and I'm going to, the next little bit is just going to be me gushing about episode 10. Episode 10 was great. Episode 10 was fantastic. Especially the battle scene. Oh my god, the battle scene was amazing. Like, and again, they didn't even show too much. They showed you just enough to make you nut, and then the fight scene was over. And one thing that really made me happy, they would shoot colored missiles at each other. Like, Twister and her group, they had power missiles. They were red, because in the games, the power missile is red. You don't have very many of them, and you shoot it, it's a straight line. It doesn't deviate from the path you shoot it on, but it does a lot of damage. And in the show, they only allowed John Doe and Quiet to have one, because again, the power missile is the most limited weapon in the game. That and the landmine bomb thing that you can use to destroy the Eiffel Tower in Twisted Metal 2. Those are the two rarest weapons. It's very, especially, I do think Power Missile, at least in Twisted Metal 2, is the most rare weapon. And it's the most difficult to use because, like, the Fire Missile homes a teeny bit, and the homing missile is actually the most useful. But the Power Missile, like, again, they used it to great effect in the show, just the way that it's normally used. And they even got the homing missiles right, because the homing missiles in most of the games, I would say all of the games, the homing missile is purple. Whenever a purple missile was shot in the show, it homed in on whoever it was fired at, which is great. It really shows that the people who wrote this show and put this together cared about the games and paid attention to the lore. And that makes me really happy. Honestly, I feel similarly about the Twisted Metal TV show that I do about the Sonic the Hedgehog movies. Because the Sonic movies, I think the Sonic movies are better than the Twisted Metal show, but the respect for the source material is there. The people who are making the Sonic movies, you can tell, even if you don't think they're that great at movies, which I think both of the Sonic movies are great, but I'm incredibly biased. But you can tell that they have respect for the source material. And the same thing here with Twisted Metal. And I'm just blown away, because I thought that this was not going to be that great. I didn't think it was going to suck, because most people thought that this show was going to be terrible. I thought it was going to be bad, but not the worst thing I've ever seen. I thought it was going to just be, like, to give it a letter grade, I thought it was going to be like a D+, C-. I was not expecting like a B- to a B. I am very pleasantly surprised that the show is decent. And again, the thing I'm most impressed by is how much they held back. Because again, season 1 is a prologue. It is very much, the purpose of season 1 is introduce John Doe, introduce Quiet, introduce the world, introduce Sweet Tooth. What makes these characters tick? Why should you care about them? Because if they did what everyone thought they were going to do and what many people would want them to do, just season 1, just have a tournament. If they just started with a tournament and then tried to fill in the gaps here and there, it would be way more hollow. So it's kind of risky, but also a smart play that season 1 there was no tournament, which right there you risked pissing off fans, which it kind of pissed me off a little bit because I thought that they were just straight up just not going to have a tournament because screw the lore. But I underestimated them. I was not expecting them to hold off on the tournament until season 2 because season 1 is going to be all about building up these characters. And I respect that. Although, again, it didn't always have the most solid execution. There were some episodes that I thought were very boring. And the comedy was a little forced at points. But, and again, Anthony Mackie was hilarious as John Doe. And Quiet, I thought that Quiet was just going to be the stern, pissed off, strong, independent, feminist character that... This basically Captain Marvel, except in Twisted Metal, to where she's an unlikable character, but you're supposed to like her anyway because she's a woman. That kind of shit that we're all sick and tired of at this point. But no, they actually made her a solid, likable character. She's a flawed character, but she's likable. And I enjoyed her character. And although I do think the whole she was a slave, she was a slave thing was a little forced and a little unnecessary. I kind of get it because, in a way, one thing... I just thought of this just now. Okay, this kind of fixes it for me. I still think it's a little bit much and a little, like, what is this slavery, like, subplot doing in a Twisted Metal show? But basically, I can kind of see the little subtlety, the underlying one of the underlying themes of Twisted Metal in general is be careful what you wish for. And I just realized this, and this is honestly kind of brilliant writing. The whole time, John Doe wants to be on the inside. He wants to live the good life, because he's spent his entire life on the outside not even knowing who he is. His dream is to be on the inside. He gets his dream, but he gets bored, because he's not doing anything. He got what he wished for, but it isn't what he wanted, so be careful what you wish for. And as far as Quiet is concerned, the reason she was a slave is because her and her brother were tricked into this position that they wanted. It was their wish to be a part of this system, but when they got into it, they were abused and turned into indentured servants and slaves and treated terribly. Because again, be careful what you wish for. And Calypso's thing, his entire thing is, if you're not careful what you wish for, he will laugh at you while he fucks your wish up. He will give you a demented, deranged, not at all what you asked for variation of what you wished for. And then laugh at you for not phrasing it better. Because Calypso's the best asshole ever. Calypso's such a good heel, especially in Twisted Metal 2. Twisted Metal 2, Calypso is such an amazing heel. He's got such an awesome, amazing, punchable face. And I think Calypso, his best, the best iteration of Calypso is Twisted Metal 2 and Twisted Metal 2012. Those are Calypso at his best. And I hope that we get something like that in the TV show. And I'm going to love it. I'm going to be so happy if when we finally get to see him, his face is burnt. Because in Twisted Metal 2 and in Twisted Metal 1 and Twisted Metal 2, Calypso has he has like a meat face because his face has been damaged. So if they do that, that's gonna make me happy. But if they go the Twisted Metal 2012 route where he looks like a normal guy with like a subtle undertone of this dude might actually be fucking evil, I won't mind that either. As long as they don't go the Twisted Metal Black route. I hate the Calypso in Twisted Metal Black. For one, they removed his hair. Why the fuck would you remove Calypso's hair? Calypso in Twisted Metal Black is just like generic bad guy number 85. And I just hate it. So yeah, but again, this whole underlying theme here of be careful what you wish for, that's definitely going to come into play in Season 2 of this show, because that's Calypso's entire modus operandi, to fuck with people. And if you are not careful with how you word your wish, you're walking into a death trap. Because the underlying theme of of every Twisted Metal game, even the poopy ones, is be careful what you wish for. And the fact that we have two characters that got what they wished for and they regretted it, that's genius. There are parts of Twisted Metal, the TV show, that are shockingly well written. And I can't believe I'm saying that. Although, again, I do think the whole slavery subplot is a little just like, I was not. It's more just it feels out of left field for a Twisted Metal show to go into that. I'm not opposed to it. I just wasn't expecting it. But under the guise of be careful what you wish for, that makes it work for me. Let's see what else. And again, by the end of season 1, they tease Axel, they tease Mr. Grimm. They didn't so much tease Twister as have Twister straight up do things. Although I'm still waiting for her to bust out a move that turns her into a tornado. I'm looking forward to that. And real quick, that one dude in the episode where they had Bloody Mary, the dude, Mr. Slam, my God. In Twisted Metal 2, Mr. Slam, he's the guy that drives the construction vehicle, the forklift. And it has that big mouth on it, and he grabs you and slams you because he's Mr. Slam. In the show, Mr. Slam is this fat dude with a comically enormous penis that he uses to smash watermelons. There are some parts of the show where I legitimately am in complete and utter disbelief, and I'm just like, what in the fuck am I watching? Sometimes this show feels like the weirdest acid trip. And it's very Twisted Metal for it to be it's a twisted show. It's a very strange, bizarre show that it has its flaws. It has its parts that could be more well refined and fine tuned. There are some episodes that could stand to be less boring, and they could dial back the comedy a little bit. Again, whenever it's just the banter or the snarky remarks or the situational humor, that's when the comedy is at its best. It's when they go to the more vulgar stuff and the gross out toilet humor where I'm just like, this went from being a mature show to something that was written by a bunch of 5-year-olds. So yeah, and we're almost at the hour mark for this podcast, and my closing thoughts on the Twisted Metal TV show. Season 1, I thought, was a very good first step. Overall, it's solid. I have my pros and I have my cons. Do I recommend this show? If you are a Twisted Metal fan, absolutely. If you are not a Twisted Metal fan, this might actually be a good place to start. It's so weird, and I thought about this the other day. I feel like this show might be better for people that aren't familiar with Twisted Metal than people that are. Because for people like me, it took me a second to figure out what they were going for. And until I figured that out, I wasn't completely on board with the show. Because I was afraid that they were going to just spit in the face of everything and slap the Twisted Metal bumper sticker on top of it and pretend that it's something that it's not. But when I figured out what they were doing, I was more on board with the show. Whereas if I had never heard of Twisted Metal before, I probably would have been hooked by the first episode. So I do think this would be more accessible for people that have never played a Twisted Metal game. It might encourage them to actually give the video games a shot. For example, I work at Pizza Hut, and one of my coworkers was talking to me just the other day, and he said, dude, me and you were talking about the Twisted Metal show on Peacock the other day. When I got home the other day from work, my fiance was like, dude, I'm watching this new show on Peacock called Twisted Metal, and it's awesome. And that just made me smile because, we have a new Twisted Metal fan. That's one of the best things I'll say about Twisted Metal on Peacock. It is creating more Twisted Metal fans than previous. This show I did not think it was going to do this, but it is breathing new life into a franchise that desperately needs something. Twisted Metal needed some kind of shot in the arm, and I think this show is it. They just need to dial back the comedy a little bit and perhaps figure out a way to make the more expository stuff less boring. Because some of the more expository, these are these people, this is this place, this is how this works, this is this person's backstory. Some of that got a little bit exposition heavy, which makes it a little boring. They need to fine tune some things. There are some areas to improve. But again, season 1 is just a prologue. So I have high hopes for Season 2. I think Season 2 is going to be fantastic. I could be wrong. Season 2 might suck, and it might blow the entire thing. But if they play their cards right, they've done this very intelligently thus far, even though maybe the execution wasn't always the best. But so far, I'm on board. And I have faith that Season 2 is going to be great. Once the tournament gets started and we get some episodes that are just some absolutely insane, just full-on Twisted Metal death matches, maybe some of them have different stipulations. I don't know. But I am excited. Once we get some Twisted Metal, just straight-up deathmatch action, shit's going to get good. And shit's going to get wild. And I'm excited. I'm excited for Axel. I'm excited for Mr. Grimm. And I'm excited for other characters they might bring in. Like, I want to see Shadow. I want to see Thumper. I want to see Grasshopper. I want to see Calypso. I want to see if he has a fugly burn face. I want to see. They even referenced the drag queen racer from Twisted Metal. I think it was Twisted Metal 4. That person was referenced in the episode that Pizza Boy was referenced in. I want to see Calypso be the final boss and him drive around with a missile strapped to it that's basically a nuclear warhead. Maybe they can do that for Twisted Metal Season 3. I don't know. But yeah, so yeah, if you are a Twisted Metal fan, if you're not a Twisted Metal fan, give Twisted Metal Season 1 on Peacock a shot. Give it a chance. And if you can make it through the boring episodes, there's a lot of stuff here that I think you'll like, and it's a perfect setup for what should be an awesome Season 2. I have high hopes for Season 2, which I did not think I was going to say. This show surprised me, and I am looking forward to what happens next. And speaking of what happens next, as of right now and today is, oh my God, it's Tuesday morning. It's 12:04 at the time of me recording this, and it's August. It's the first day of August as I'm recording this. Me and my little brother Me and my brother have been recording. Me and him going through every Dragon Ball Z video game I have and doing tournament mode. When we're done with that, we just recorded Raging Blast 2. Or I guess while we're doing that, to parallel that. Simultaneously, that's the word I'm looking for. I'm tired. Cut me some slack. So basically, in celebration of the Twisted Metal show, and in honor of the Twisted Metal show, and how much I love this show, and this franchise, starting soon, me and my brother are going to go through each and every single Twisted Metal game and try to do the tournament mode and go all the way to the end and win. We're going to do Twisted Metal 1. We're going to do Twisted Metal 2. We're going to do Twisted Metal 3. And I'm going to hate it because that game is awful. One of the worst video games I've ever played. We're going to do Twisted Metal 4. We're going to do Twisted Metal Small Brawl. We're going to do Twisted Metal Black. Twisted Metal Head On. We're even going to do Twisted Metal Lost, which is a bonus feature in Twisted Metal, Twisted Metal Head On, the Extra Twisted Edition. And we're going to do Twisted Metal 2012. And after all that's done, I'm going to do a retrospective of the Twisted Metal. It's going to be like the Marilyn Manson video I did where I ranked all of them. I'm going to do some kind of retrospective ranking video of all the Twisted Metal games. And I know there's tons and tons and tons of Twisted Metal retrospective videos out there. There's even one where they actually interviewed David Jaffe, which shocked me. Go watch that one. I can't remember what video it is, but there's a Twisted Metal retrospective video out there where they actually interviewed David Jaffe. So go find that and watch that. So I'll be looking forward to some more Twisted Metal content here on TAW Gaming. And right after this, I have another podcast coming right up that'll be in a couple days, so I'll be looking forward to that. And thank you guys so much for listening, and long live Twisted Metal. We're back, bitches. Couldn't be happier. Good night, everybody.